25 years ago, Jacqueline Carey published Kushiel's Dart and changed what fantasy romance could be. Today, I got to sit down with her to celebrate that anniversary, and we talked about everything. How she built the theology of Terre, why Phèdre's voice demanded a more ceremonial and lyrical prose, what it felt like to finally write Joscelin's perspective, and what she wants first-time readers to pay attention to when reading the series. If you have been on the fence about reading the series, or if you are a devoted rereader who has lived with these books for years, this conversation is for you. And stay tuned to the end because we are launching our full read-along of the Kushiel's Legacy series right now. Details at the end for that, but let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here with us at Reading Under the Covers for the 25th anniversary celebration of Kushiel's Dart.
Thanks so much for having me. I love that you're freaking out a little bit. It's been 25 years.
Oh my God. I'm freaking out a little bit too, so I can't imagine. Actually, I feel like this series and Phèdre as a character has meant so much to so many people, myself included. I know I picked up the series years ago, and I was a little intimidated before picking it up. I'm not going to lie, because it's so big. I actually had read other books by you before going into that one. But once you're in with these characters, it's just, you're so invested in their journey and their story, and you feel everything that they're going through, which is amazing, I think. So I think it's such an impactful thing that you created. So actually, that's my first question to you, because looking back at writing this in 2001, and when you finished it and you put it out into the world, did you have any idea of any sense of what it would become, both from an impact of what the series would have, but also even writing-wise, the scope of what the series became? Did you actually know what you had written when you finished writing Kushiel's Dart?
I knew from the beginning it was a big idea. It was to write something, and for anyone unfamiliar with this, it is a historical fantasy set in an alternate version of medieval Provence, created a whole theology based on the Book of Enoch and fallen angels, who my people are the descendants of. So I knew I was playing with some large-scale ideas, but it was also a reaction to all the dudes in epic fantasy at the time. And I went way over the top responding to that. So I wasn't surprised there was going to be a big reaction to that. I love that it's endured so long.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that some of the things that a lot of readers talk about is how much they've connected with the characters and the emotions and the feelings. Like, I know I've talked to many people where they've reread the series 6, 7, 8 times over the span of the 20 years. Do you think that your relationship with Phèdre as a character has changed over time?
Absolutely, and even over the course of writing the series. She was from the beginning the kind of character that it was intimidating. The idea, can I write a character who is this divinely ordained masochist and have it be a feminist work? So it was a big challenge. And she is very young and impulsive in the first book. It's her arc of growth over, and especially when there's a 10-year gap between the second and third. It's cool because the books then reward rereading as you yourself change and grow. I wrote them well over the course of a decade. So yeah, and now she's become iconic as opposed to this terrifying, exhilarating idea.
Yeah, and actually going back to what you just said about writing a feminist character, but she also is a masochist and all these things. How did you balance those two things? Because I think that is done really well in throughout the series, but was there something you struggle with in balancing those ideas?
Two things I think were really key. One, making the idea of consent a sacred tenet in the theology of Terre, so that it's clear that is the framework in which we are operating. Sexuality is sacred in my world. And the other is using the first-person voice. Removes that potential for a voyeuristic view. You're there. Mm-hmm. You're immersed. Yeah. You are in the experience. Those are two things that I think help keep me on that tightrope.
For sure, I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. Now, I feel like also because you are getting to discover this world, like with a lot of the really epic fantasies, the beginning can be a little difficult and dense to get into and learn all the theology and how everything works. What would you say to a reader that is finding it hard to get into it? What is your suggestion for someone that's going through that?
First suggestion is just let it wash over you because it ultimately will become clear and you don't need to retain all the details. That's what Phèdre's for. She's doing it for you.
Yeah.
The other is when I wrote Cassiel's Servant, which is a retelling of Kushiel's Dart from the point of view of Joscelin. It's also a far more accessible book that can serve as an entry into the series. We had a saying around my household when I was working on that, which was, does Joscelin give a damn? And so much of the things that Kushiel's Dart is wonderfully dense and rich with in the first portion, all of that intrigue, all of the opulence, all of the couture, Joscelin does not give a damn about those things, and that is legitimately germane to his character. So cutting it out in his version was liberating, but also very much had integrity with his vision.
Yeah, and that makes total sense for his character. So with the religion in Terre and the ambassade concept, I feel like those are so specific but really well realized in the series. How did you go about building all that theology? Did you know all of it when you started the first book? Did you have everything fleshed out, or bits and pieces came to you as you were uncovering the story?
I had a really serendipitous thing occur. I had a friend who worked for a company that did coffee table books, and it was mostly, they were picture books. And she called me from New York one day. She was going into a pitch meeting. She's, hey, I know you're a struggling writer. Have you got anything off the top of your head? And the only thing I could think of was my mother telling me, honey, angels are really popular right now. You should do something with angels. And I was like, yes, something with angels. And they ended up buying it. So I wrote this as a work for hire and did deep research into the theology of, I can't remember now, but at least half a dozen specific angels, pulling out the narratives of those stories, and that's when I read a lot of the Apocrypha that went into. So basically, I got paid to do the research.
That's amazing.
Really compelling. I am going to build an entire world based on this structure.
That is actually a really cool story of how it came to be. So you basically had everything researched and said before you even fleshed out the concept of Phèdre and her story as a character.
Well, at least the theology part.
Yeah.
And I did do a pretty deep dive into the BDSM community, which I am familiar with but was not a member of. But that was what the character insisted on. So that's something, again, I wanted to treat with tremendous responsibility and integrity. And
Yeah.
hope I
and I
managed.
think that definitely comes through, I think, in the story. Also, something that I noticed from reading also other works by you, I feel the prose in Kushiel's Dart is very almost ceremonial in a way, whereas very different from, for example, the Agent of Hell series. So it's a big contrast in how it's written and the voice. Was that a conscious choice that you knew for this particular story you needed something like that, a little bit more lyrical? Or was that just Phèdre that was calling for that herself, or how did you come to that? Because obviously you can write differently.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have a pretty naturally Baroque literary voice, and at the time conventional wisdom was, no, if you want to have a career writing commercial fiction, then it's got to be succinct, it's got to be spare, it's got to be clean, tight, terse prose. So I forced myself to try and write that way for a long time and did not find commercial success doing so. And so when I had this huge idea for this book, I was like, okay, I am going to throw out the rule book. I'm writing to all my strengths. And I just let the Baroque flow, which totally suited the character.
Yes.
I think after so many hundreds of thousands of words of lyrical prose. There were times when then I needed to switch. Santa Olivia was probably one of the first things I wrote after that, and that was like, okay, I'm going to do something really terse and muscular. And I had a friend call me and say, "You dropped the F-bomb on page 1. Who are you even?"
Yeah. I found that really interesting with reading other books by you, but both I feel are so well done and so enjoyable. Also, going back to the Angouset concept and Phèdre and pain and pleasure and the relationship with all of that, how much of that do you think came from the character herself as it came to you, or how much was it just from how society was and the theology that you developed?
It definitely came from the character, but I think also in conceiving of her, I or my muse or subconscious was reacting to this idea we have. If there is a strong female character in fantasy, she's often forged in a cauldron of suffering and violation and the rape trope. And I was like, I am going to turn that on its head so hard. So I'm sure some of it was a reaction to that. But I did really want to take this conjunction of eroticism and violence that pervades so much of our popular culture, certainly not just fantasy, and go, okay, we're going to turn that inside out and put it in the foreground and discuss it.
Yeah, yeah. I love how it's discussed in the book. And speaking of other characters, which I also love, we have Delaney, Melisande, Joscelin. I feel like they also bring out different parts of Phèdre's self, Phèdre's character. Was that intentional from the beginning, or was it just how those characters came to be?
Yeah, characters are... I'm very much a plotter and a researcher, but there is a part of the creative process that has that capital M mystery, and characters are that for me. Sometimes choices are intentional, like with Joscelin, I wanted him to be a contrasting figure. He has to be a foil. So who's going to be a foil to one of the world's most famous courtesans? Oh, how about a rigidly celibate warrior priest? That's deliberate in a sense, but the personalities themselves, I don't know where they come from.
Yeah. For example, with Melisande, I think she's one of the most compelling antagonists in fantasy. Did you have any conflicts with how much people liked her character, being that, technically, maybe we shouldn't like her so much?
She operates within her own theological strictures. She has a lot of integrity in her own twisted way. So, yeah, when you see an evil person with tons of minions and you're like, why? What is in it for you serving this guy? You're just cannon fodder. At least with Melisande, you can see the allure.
Yeah, you definitely can. And with Joscelin's arc especially, I feel like throughout the trilogy, throughout the 3 books, we see so much of his character journey going through. There's faith fracturing and reforming, but also love. How conscious also were you of writing that in parallel? Because I feel like he's getting his own growth journey as well. Was it a conscious choice of having that in parallel to Phèdre's growth? Because I feel like what I'm trying to say is I feel all these characters are always so very fleshed out in their own journey. And they're not just there as supporting characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I was just talking about that with somebody recently. I love a book where it feels as though any given character could take the story and walk off with it. They are fully realized unto themselves. And yeah, I think about their arcs and whether it's on the page or not, where they are in it, with a character who is traveling the same path like Joscelin. It's natural to consider what his emotional journey is.
And I know that we are not going to necessarily talk favorites, but is there a particular thing about each of these characters that you connect with more yourself?
Yeah, I'm terrible with favorite questions because immediately it's, oh, that's Sophie's choice, don't ask me that. But I will always be, frankly, just flat out grateful for the gift of a character like Phèdre, who is so unusual. But Melisande is insanely fun to write. Joscelin's pretty fun to write. He's got a dry sense of humor that not everybody gets. Hyacinth is just a delight. Favriel, she's fun. No, I can't do favorites.
I know favorites are difficult. Now, going to Joscelin, what made you want to return to the original story from his point of view?
It's funny. That's one of those questions I was asked periodically. Would you ever? And no, I would not. And I even wrote the novel Starless. I'm like, haha, this takes place training a young warrior. All the more reason to never write Joscelin's story. And then I had a request from a nonprofit that I've supported before to do something personal to add to a giveaway, and it ended up being a sonnet. And I polled my readers. I'm like, okay, who would you like to see me write a sonnet from and to? And the most popular answer was from Joscelin to Phèdre. So I sat down and wrote an Elizabethan sonnet, as one does. It was the first time I had put myself squarely in his head and given voice to his interior thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised by both how compelling it was and unexpectedly intimate. And I'm like, oh, I want to write this story now. And I thought it's something that I think readers would enjoy, and it would also, as I said, allow me to create a more accessible entry into Terre, and also to explore the flip side of it's easy for everybody to get morally offended by the night court, say. And, oh my God, your main character is born into this house of prostitution where they raise children. And I'm like, and her counterpart is at 10 years old, taught swordplay and killing. Yeah, some strong elements we're dealing with on both sides of the equation of life and death. Yeah. I am not saying children should be placed in these adult situations. I'm telling the story of two characters who were, and because they bookend like that, it made sense to me.
Yeah, it definitely does. Do you think that, besides the fact that Joscelin doesn't care, do you think that writing Kushiel's servant gave you any insight into the story that maybe you didn't realize or you didn't see before?
Well, I'm not sure to what extent it was a conscious decision and what it felt like a revealed truth that he knows how he feels about her way before she's figured it out. And I knew that people think of Phèdre's books as being, really spicy. And they are, but often not quite as much as you think. When you look back, I remembered that as being a lot more graphic. But also, it drew a veil of discretion over scenes that really matter to her emotionally. And he doesn't do that. And that was a weird contrast. Oh, I knew she wasn't entirely a reliable narrator, but yeah, there are some cards that she has always played very close to her chest, and it was interesting getting a look at them from the other side of the table, as it were.
For sure. I feel like they are probably one of the more epic couples when it comes to fantasy books, so definitely the contrast is one of the things I love most about them. And so going back to somebody new getting into these books, because I'm actually going to be hosting a read-along of the series to try to push the series on people, as I've been doing for years, but making it a little bit more accessible and bite-sized chunks. What would you say for somebody starting to read the series, or even somebody rereading the series, maybe some things that they can take away from that, or to watch out for?
To watch out for. There are going to be a few points where you hate me.
Just a few.
One of the things when you're writing in the first person, unless you're doing something really tricky from a literary standpoint, it's pretty obvious that the protagonist is going to survive until the end. And I am not pulling the rug out from under anybody with that. So that means that to keep the stakes believably high, sometimes bad things happen to characters we wish they did not. But I think, for me, one of the most enduringly compelling ideas in this series is the precept of Blessed Elua. Love as thou wilt is a refrain that's repeated over and over. And it can be taken at a glance as a sort of license, as permission, but it is also a commandment to love. And that's something, the idea that love is a force with divine agency in this world is something I think we all very much want to be true. And I wrote this book as though it were quite literally true in a way that we can see and measure.
That's beautiful. And I think it makes total sense. I also wanted to share something with you that someone commented on my blog, and it's a reader of the series that has read it at least 6 times, so every couple of years they reread it, and there was a particular quote that they shared that was really impactful and meaningful to them, and it's, "Phèdre yields with a willow's grace and endures with the strength of mountains. Without her, life would be calm and yet lack all meaning." And that was something that for them was so impactful. What is it, because I'm sure this happens to you at signings and whenever you meet readers, what does that mean to you when something that you wrote has had such an impact in someone else's life, where whether they saw themselves, they felt seen, or they healed by reading the story? How does that make you feel?
It's tremendously moving, and I've cried at a number of signings because readers have made me cry. I think at first, 25 years ago, I was just, oh wow, that's really amazing. Now, I'm 61 now, and I think about legacy in ways that I didn't. And I am both proud and humbled to have a legacy like that. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing more about the series and a little behind the scenes on what it took to spend 25 years with these characters.
My pleasure. Thank you
and
so much.
And sharing them with us.
Thank you for sharing your love of them with the world. I appreciate that so much. And the reason we're still talking about these books 25 years later is 100% due to the readers. And I love you all for it.
That is Jacqueline Carey on 25 years of Kushiel's Dark. I hope you loved that as much as I did. And now if this conversation made you want to finally pick up this series, or if you are ready to reread it with a community behind you, then we are launching our Kushiel's Legacy read-along right now. We're going to be roughly reading about 200 pages per month. So we'll go through all 3 main books in this trilogy, plus Kushiel's Servant. We're going to have monthly podcast discussions, and the full community will be over on Discord, the blog, or also replying to our newsletters for the read-along. All the details are on the blog. I'm going to leave that link down below. So go sign up for it. You'll get email reminders along the way, and come and read along with us. I will see you for the first checkpoint in about a month. But for now, that is all I have for you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.